Joining me today, we have Rich Bass, Vice President of Learning Solutions here at ELB Learning. And without further ado, I will let him share his knowledge with you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hello, everybody. And it is great to be with you today, sharing my screen here. Stephanie, can you see my screen here?
I can. It looks beautiful.
Awesome. I'll be jumping around a little bit to different screens today as we talk about this concept around outsourcing custom course development. And I want to start by saying this. So like many of you who are with us today, you likely have been in this space for a while. I started as an instructional designer and facilitator. Well, I guess really a facilitator, doing new hire training for a financial company back in my 20s. Now I'm 53, so it's been 30 years, for me. And over the years, I've been inside of a big organization as an employee providing training services. I definitely am one of those, I guess, accidental instructional designers. You probably read the book, maybe some of you have, where you I started out on the phones at my previous, at my company back in the 20s. I'm sorry, back when I was in my 20s. I'm not going all the way back to like 1920s. But when I was in my 20s, started on the phones, worked my way up through some various positions, and I really wanted to get into the training department. So that's where I ended up. And some big companies, like many of you on the call today, have your own internal departments, learning and development teams that handle design and development and delivery. Well, this concept is really what we're going to be talking about today is when you come to a point where the demands of your internal teams are such that you need to be thinking about outsourcing. And eLearning Brothers didn't start as an outsourced company. Well, now we're ELB Learning. So I think everybody probably knows by now we've rebranded. So when eLearning Brothers started back in 2009, it's just really a templates company providing cool games and layout treatments and awesome PowerPoint files and cutout characters and all of the stuff that maybe you saw back 10 plus years ago. And over the last 10, 12 years, we've migrated to a much bigger offering. But right after the two brothers who started the company operated just with templates for a few years, they added a custom services team. That's when I came in back in 2012. So for me, I've been here about 10 years. But prior to that, I was just sort of a lone gun. I had a buddy, business partner, who's actually working with us now, my friend Todd. He and I were doing our own thing for about 8 years before we met the brothers, and then we started working with them. So we were, not only was I an internal guy at a big company, just doing training and development and design for various initiatives for the company. Then I started my own practice and I became an outsourced guy. I just put my shingle up and said, hey, I'm going to be a professional learning services guy with my business partner. And he and I just were providers for many, many years. And some of you who are on the call today may be in that boat, where you're consultants or contractors, and you're providing training for your clients. And then, of course, we joined this bigger enterprise, which has now become ELB Learning, and it's certainly growing and really starting to grab a global footprint in offering both products and services. So, as we talk today, please feel free, sun is shining on my camera, please feel free to ask questions as we move along, because I'm happy to share my experience that has really boiled down to these 7 best practices. So as a guy who has been an internal training manager, one of the reasons I started my own practice as just a small business of 2 guys, and we ran that for about 10 years, but we did that because we would often think, or I would often think, these guys I'm hiring, I could do better myself. In some cases, not in every case, but that's what I did. Jumped out in 2004 and started my own business, just providing professional learning services. And so I've certainly learned these 7 best practices are tried and true. And I believe everybody who registered will get a copy of this. So I'm going to be showing you about a 10-page ebook. I was actually going to make a cool PowerPoint deck with this, but I thought, well, this is so well done, I'll just use this. And I'll be jumping out and sharing different screens with you as we move along today. So this whole concept gets into some pieces of the puzzle. And there are several pieces of a puzzle that need to come together to create effective learning. And I hope all of us know that, who are on the call today on this webinar. I think we do, because we're probably, most of us, learning professionals in some capacity or another, whether that's, as I said, a contractor, maybe you're providing services as a designer, or even a facilitator, or you may be managing a learning function inside of an organization. It really boils down to time, skills, and money. So, if you're running low on time and you've got to get something out the door and you don't have the people, then you probably should think about maybe outsourcing. And it is more affordable than you might think. And it can just make sense. You could say, well, I got a big initiative due by end of Q1 2023. My boss has just put this on my table or on my desk, and I got to get it done. I only have 4 designers and 2 facilitators, or whatnot. But you're short on people. Well, you can go hire a couple of more people, and the going rate, I know it's different around the country, but I think a good average rate for a decent designer of, let's say, learning tech, somebody that's going to come in and know how to build something in a way that can go online and look beautiful. It's going to be in the neighborhood of $80, $90, $100,000. We call those combos, by the way. If you can get an instructional designer plus a developer, somebody who understands how to craft a learning experience that has learning objectives, identifies specifics regarding what the learner needs to know and do, and then go build that in a way that looks nice. You also need somebody who's got great graphic arts skills. Here at ELB Learning, we have graphic artists who specialize in just that, project managers who are specialists in managing projects, designers, instructional designers who are really great at crafting a very creative and interesting experience. I'm going to show you some of that today. And then developers, people who understand how to make things work on a phone and a tablet, and how to troubleshoot things correctly so that it's going to work for your LMS reporting and all the things you got to think about. But you could outsource that, and rather than getting 2 or 3 resources that will be $100,000 to $200,000 on your payroll, you could maybe spend half that and bring in a team that can help get this done over the next X period of time. And I think, as we all know, it all boils down to dollars and cents. When you're talking to internal folks, trying to get your boss's approval, trying to find budget. So it's complex. And I guess I just want to say that back in the day, remember I said I started my own business. So if you remember correctly, some of you who are older like me, this was 03, 04, 05. So what tools were available at that time to get stuff online? Adobe Captivate was out. I got real good at Captivate 3. So that was 20 years ago, 18 years ago. But it was me doing the design in Captivate 3. And we landed some projects, and we felt like we knew enough to make it happen. My buddy, who is now in our operations, he's our chief ops officer here at ELB Learning. He was a genius at operations, making sure the projects were lining up correctly. And I took on the instructional design and the builds. And I quickly found out I am not a graphic artist. I'll never forget when we hired a guy to be our graphic artist, and we showed him what we were building for a client project. This was 05 or 06. And he said, this looks like clip art. You might as well be using screen beans from PowerPoint. Are you a professional learning service company or what? Is this what you're going to give to your client? Anyway, it was very humbling for me. And I realized, I sort of gave that up and realized I'm not a designer. And maybe you're not either. And maybe nobody's told you that yet because you're not in your 50s like me. Maybe you're young like I was back in the day and you think I can do it all. And maybe you can. And if you can, we call you a combo. And we want to talk to you. I'm just kidding. But it's tough to find people who understand design, who are very good at graphics. And today with tools like Canva and other image editors, it can make it look easy, but you still got to know what looks good. Some people got it, some people don't. So anyway, we're going to talk about these 7 practices today. I'm going to jump around a little bit. I'm not going to read all this, I promise. But getting into uncover your learning objectives, goals, and success criteria That's an important part. Again, you're going to get this book afterwards. This is step one. What is it you're trying to do? What's going to be successful for you? And there are ways that you can look at your learning initiative. And I don't need to tell you this. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but as you consider what's coming and what needs to be done. And by the way, I'd like to throw this out there. Many of us who are in learning functions, we know not only what's on fire, but what's sitting back here, in the back room that hasn't been addressed in forever and that is outdated and everybody hates. My old compliance training that I got to get to one day, but I can't because I got new services and new product lines and new procedures and this state requirement and that federal requirement that I got to update. Sometimes it's biting the bullet to say we don't have the staff, we don't have the expertise to convert all that old flash stuff to the new stuff, because it's just like all the money we've spent over the years is just not, it needs a refresher. It needs to be updated. So that could be part of your objectives and goals and your success criteria. Sometimes we get so thick in the middle of everything. I call it, you've heard this before, but I call it working in the machine instead of on the machine. And we could spend an hour just talking about how important it is to step back and look at the whole, which is why I think managers and leaders are so important. Because while the rest of us, good soldiers, are in there cranking stuff out, getting the classes going, getting the stuff built, your leader needs to be on top looking at, meeting with the senior executive teams, finding out what the objectives of the company are. Where are we going? Where's the industry going? We're going to talk about that too. Your vendor that you choose or provider. Some of you may just choose a contractor like me back in the day, which is great. And that may completely meet your needs. I had a lot of happy clients back in the day. But you may also need an organization who gets new learning trends, understands where the industry is going, and can make suggestions to you that you haven't thought of. And I will say this, by the way, stuff like awesome games, and I'm not talking about the kinds of games you can build in Captivate or Storyline or even Lectora. These are the tools that are out there that are the top 3 for rapid authoring. But I'm talking about a Candy Crush style game that looks very good on your phone. Or whatnot, that can be tough to build, really tough. Now you're getting into the kind of skills that real game developers have. And so your vendor, you may want something that isn't just going to look, I come from the South. I know I don't sound like it. I live in Utah now, which is where our corporate headquarters is. But back when I was growing up, we used the word Bobo. You don't want it to look Bobo, meaning it just looks like, wow, who threw that together? You've seen the old, it's on Netflix now. Nailed it. It's the baking show. Make a cake that looks like this. And I always crack up at that show. But understand where you're headed. I think that's very, very important. And before you need to go higher, maybe consider all of these things. And again, I'll let you read that in depth as you move along. This concept around aligning with a partner who can help realize your goals, I think it's very important. By the way, you can put out an RFP. And if you've never done one before, contact me, Richard at elblearning.com. I got loads of samples I can share with you. It's a 2-pager, it's a 3-pager. Sometimes if you're a big company, it's a 90-pager of all the requirements for working with us. But you could simply say, hey, I have a need for a designer. I have a need for a facilitator. I have a need for, whatever, and send it out to a variety of organizations who do this type of work. I'm going to show you here in a minute that we've expanded now from just providing custom services to also providing staff augmentation services. So just at the beginning of this year, ELB Learning acquired a company called Core Access, and their specialty is staff augmentation, providing designers, providing developers. And you can interview 5 or 6 and say which one fits. Bring them in, agree upon a rate, and you're going to pay that person for 3 months. And that's how they live. They roll right off those projects and move to the next. But while they're dedicated to you, I think you would find it a very compelling experience. Many of you have probably heard of the gig economy. And that means I can get a gig just by going on my phone. I can drive for Lyft. That's part of the gig economy. I can deliver for DoorDash or Postmates. That's part of the gig economy. in this day and age, post-pandemic, I shouldn't call it post-pandemic. I'll just call it post-lockdown. We were all locked down for a while. Now we're not as locked down, but we are noticing in our world, and we live in the world of professional learning services folks, people who are available for hire, that go from gig to gig. And there's more and more and more of them. And you may find that that's the best way to manage your business. Again, when you're short on time, skills, and people, that's the priority. It all boils down to money, but you're going to spend it one way or the other. And I always like to say this. I didn't make this up. I can never remember who the original quoter of this was, but the quote is, if you think training is expensive, try not training your people and see how expensive that is. So I think we all know that as learning professionals who are here today. And so it does boil down to money, but you're going to pay for it one way or another. Either that initiative is not going to get done, or it's not going to get done well, and it's going to turn out being a real, negative experience. So choosing the right partner is huge. It is an extension of your own team, whether that's bringing an entire team, which typically has a higher price tag. And we can talk budget if you'd like. If you're interested in that, put it in the chat. And I can share some numbers and dollars with you. How much does it cost to typically build an hour of learning, 30 minutes of seat time for an external vendor that's bringing a full team, to the table? What's that price tag typically? Well, what's the price tag if you just bring in your own person? It's typically cheaper to do that, but again, you're not getting the whole team. So we can talk about that as we move along here. Okay, now I'm going to start jumping out to some other screens. Talked about so far aligning your goals and then choosing the right vendor. And I don't want anybody on the call to feel scared about choosing a vendor. Some of you do have outsourced models. Did you know, by the way, that some big companies, that's all they do is outsource? So their people are getting learning programs and learning tech, games, whatever. It's all outsourced. And we do a lot of work with companies like that. If you've not done that before, and maybe you haven't, which is why you're on this call today, to think about how should I go about it? Just trust me. There's a million ways to find learning vendors that can help you. And we have a lot of our competitors who are our friends that we've known for years. We've rubbed shoulders at conferences. We've gone in on projects together. There's a lot out there. Abundance mentality fits the right definition here because there's so much out there. If we're not the right fit for you, we certainly have a team that can be hired to help you. But if we're not the right fit, we have recommended others who might be a good fit for you. Although these days, now that we've acquired a staff log firm, there's typically not much we can't do to meet your needs. So I haven't run into that yet. But let's talk about the right learning solution. I'm going to leave this slide for a minute. Let me just escape out of here. By the way, for those of you who didn't know, you can now launch from Google Drive a PDF. Click right here and go to present mode. That was an improvement that was just made to Google Chrome recently. So I was glad to discover that. I'm going to pop out here to our website. So if you go to elblearning.com, you come over here to services, go to custom learning. We have a brand new custom learning page, which is awesome. We're going to get to that in a minute too. But this pricing page does a very good job of saying, well, when I'm choosing my vendor and I need to find the right person, and again, remember, here we're talking about architecting the right solution. I want to just show you 4 things that we typically think about when we're talking about architecting the right solution. So we can get into some cost if you feel like that's helpful. But when you're looking at a vendor or you're looking at potentially outsourcing, there's really 4 things to think about. And this is how I would say any vendor worth their salt, let's call it provider, because it might not be a company you're hiring. It might be an individual or 2 individuals. Although it's so easy to just, set up a company these days. It's one of the beauties of our structure in this capitalist free enterprise society is you really can just set up a business very easily. And it's much easier to just handle the accounting and all that with a B2B business to business relationship. But you're looking at 4 things when you're talking about the right solution. What is the seat time? How long is this learning solution going to be? Sometimes you just need a half-hour learning on a particular topic. Interactivity. The levels of interactivity are important. So especially if we're talking about learning tech, keep in mind you're talking to a guy here, and anybody on the call, I know you know us. We were e-learning brothers, which is obviously a focus on e-learning or online training. But some of your learning, and this is happening a lot to us now, by the way, things are becoming blended. It's not just e-learning, especially as we're getting into more of a design thinking mentality or learning experience designers. I've changed my designation from instructional designer to learning experience designer. And the best definition I have found for learning experience design is you begin with a deep empathy for the learner. You think about that and think, well, what does that mean? Well, really, it's just about understanding their situation. Who is the learner? Where are they? Typically, where will they consume the learning? How will they consume the learning? And if you think about it from that perspective, not just instructional design, what are my learning objectives? I always love the ABCDs of the learning objectives that we all learned way back in the day. Who's the audience? What is the behavior we want them to show us as a result of the training? What is the condition under which they will perform that behavior? And what is the degree of competence that we are looking for? ABCD. Well, that's all instructional design stuff. And good designers will think about that to create a compelling experience. But a learning experience designer will go deeper and not only just think about what do they need to learn, what do they got to put in their heads, what is their situation, where do they live? Am I training an audience in Russia or the Ukraine, whether it's a war-torn country or any Eastern European area? I've got to train people over there. What are their needs? And how can we help them best consume content in a way that lets them know we haven't forgotten about them? So anyway, lots of ways to go about that. Interactivity is key. And I'm going to show you a couple of demo videos here in a minute. Content readiness. How ready is your content? Any learning provider, anybody who's providing learning services should ask you about your content readiness. Hey, does this program already exist? Is it already defined? Are you already offering it as instructor-led and you want to move it to an online? Okay, great. Well, then we have tiers of content readiness for that. I'll scroll down here just to give you a little peek. We're going to look at some of the interactivity levels, but this concept around content readiness really falls into, for us, really 5 different tiers. There's no content at all. It's just the CEO had an idea and some product's launching next month and we're building the airplane while we're flying it. Well, your provider should know that. It could go all the way to tier 4. It's development ready. Some of our clients have provided us with storyboards. We've defined each screen of this e-learning experience that we want built. And we already know how Articulate Rise works, or we want an HTML5 native build, or we're working in Domino Flow, or you name it. This is how we want it to roll. We call that tier 4. The higher the tier of content readiness, the lower the cost to you. So you may be able to do some internal work to get it ready. And so you should ask that to your vendor or to your provider. Just say, hey, if we can really ratchet up the content readiness, would that help? And then, of course, timeline is a major factor as well. I'll pause there for a second before I jump into some samples. Any questions we could take a run at right now, Stephanie or team?
Sure, Rich. So we have one question that I think applies to this. What are some of the key factors that companies should be observing during the learning design stage to make sure that it's going to fit with their vision if they're outsourcing and they want to make sure that they're on the same page with the vendor?
Excellent question. There's so many factors that go into building a learning program, but when you're talking about the design phase, I recommend starting with something like this. So I had this teed up to show you. We typically will work with a look and feel catalog. So this is something our designers have come up with. Let me zoom this a little bit here so you can get a closer look. We've got so many different options. So I think a good provider will look at your content and say, what should we accomplish with this content? We call it look and feel, because obviously there's a different look here. You can see lots of different looks, and these are actual projects we've worked on in the past. I think we have 13 different samples here, but we will often send this out to our clients to say, hey, what do you have a sense of what the content is and how does it feel to you? How's your corporate branding and standards? What are your internal standards for your, how you're submitting things or putting things out there to the customer face? So we've got several different samples we'll use. I'm not sure that, every learning provider has this level of sophistication where we can say, let's look at just some options here. This is just one of our catalogs. We have several others that you're able to look at too, but it starts with a look and feel, especially if you're going online. There's a lot of out of the box wrappers you can use from any one of the tools out there. By the way, I'll put a plug in for Lectora since that's a tool we own. We've got tons of look and feels already loaded into the Lectora tool. So you could just say, hey, I'm fine. I'm just going to choose one of these Lectora wrappers to fit what I want, and that's fine too. But you may want to go deeper. And some of the tools only allow you to go so far. And so our teams know how to get in there and tinker with the backgrounds and the colors and the icons and all of those types of things. So look and feel is one. And by the way, we could spend the whole hour on just that question and many more hours besides. But I think you start with the look and feel. Make sure that feels right. So we know where we're coming from. We won't begin designing. Well, I shouldn't say that. We do everything sort of in an agile way. So our designers will get to work immediately designing the look and feel. And then our instructional designers or LXPs or LXDs, learning experience designers, they'll get to work on doing the design. And the teams meet together frequently under the direction of the project manager to say, hey, how's that coming together? How are the instructional strategies coming along based on the content and what the client has asked for? And how's the design coming along? We want to marry the two in such a way that it works. A good example. We actually did a project for Columbia University on eating disorders. And our designer came up with an idea that the client just loved, which was any person depicted in this course, it's an e-learning course, any person depicted will have no face. So it will be faceless, every individual. And the tone or the color will be a light blue throughout, sort of a somber. There's a bit of a sadness that comes along with that because we're talking about folks who are dealing with something very serious. And that whole look and feel together with the right imagery, so sort of amorphous imagery with faceless characters, it made such a difference. And there's so much in the detail, That's when I go back to what I said earlier. I'm not a designer. I would have never thought of that. Happy to show that to you if you want to see it, by the way, but we got like 1 million samples. So anyway, so start here. I would just say start here. And then I'll add one more thing before I go off on a tangent and just go down a rabbit hole with that question. The question was, how do we make sure the design is moving forward like it should? Start with look and feel, and then move right into at least an alpha and a beta review phase and build the timeline that way. So if you got your look and feel and your graphic art team is doing this and your designer is your instructional designer or your learning experience designer, your learning architect is designing the course in such a way that they're going to marry each other, make sure you've got a couple of review rounds built in there and make sure the client knows that too. Because make sure the vendor, the provider, because you don't want to end up in this situation where everything's happy up front. We got the right vendor. We've chosen the right partner. Maybe it's a person or two. It's a small business. We've worked with some husband and wife teams that have been amazing. There's so many people out there. So you find your right provider. Everything looks great. You got the documents in place. A statement of work has been signed and you're off and running. You got your look and feel, and then you get your design and they deliver the first round. Well, they're ready to say, sign that off. Let's move on to building this thing now. But it's better to do an alpha review and a beta review if you've got the time. I hope that helps answer that question at least somewhat.
Thank you, Rich. That was great. We do have one other question that I'll do now, and then I'll let you go on to your next section. So
Okay.
You just talked about the content readiness tiers.
Mm-hmm.
We had a question. When you're talking about content readiness, do you also need to factor in content conversion? Like say the client has some legacy Flash courses and they want to convert those into HTML, or they have instructor-led training and they want to change that to virtual instructor-led training. Like where in the tiers of content readiness would that come into?
Great questions. Anytime I hear about courses that have already been built and need to be converted, or instructor-led training that's already been all built out, I'm thinking level tiers 3 or tier 4. Probably not tier 4, I should say. Well, the course to be converted could be tier 4. Let me click into that. It's ready to go. It's a fully designed storyboard. It does not require any additional instructional design. Content, audio, scripting, visual layout, page functionality. If you have an existing Flash course that you love, and you just need that to go right online in one of the newer HTML5 technologies that's going to, obviously not require Flash video or Flash player, no worries, man. You just that's great. You just convert it right over. That's tier 4. Now, if you're like, well, there's a lot of newer cool things we could do with it, well, then we might call it tier 3. But either one of those, hopefully this answers the question. We would call it tier 3 or tier 4. And by the way, your learning provider should charge you less for that. It's just less work for them. You just say, hey, take that and convert it right over to that. Yeah, easy peasy. And then instructor-led training is great. By the way, here's a rubric. This is a little insider tip that we've used over many decades of doing this type of work. If your instructor-led training is 8 hours long, your e-learning will be a little less than half that. So if I've got 8 hours of content, and let's be honest, any day-long class is not really 8 hours of instruction. You got breaks, you got lunch, etc. So let's call an 8-hour training day 6.5 hours. So if you got 6.5 hours of actual content, plan on a little less than half. 6.5 hours is probably going to be 3 hours of e-learning or online training. Now, you're still going to get some great activities, but they're going to be asynchronous. They're going to be self-paced. So when you have a classroom, and by the way, I'm not advocating getting away from classroom training. That's why, it's not the whole reason, but it's a big reason why we just said we need to rebrand. We're not just an e-learning company. We're a learning company, because so many of our clients require that blended solution, right? Where you're able to provide not only instructor-led training and e-learning, but you might end up doing a little VR piece in there, which some could say that's really online learning, but yeah, but it's a different component there. You might have folks really engaging in some games and they're going head to head now. Well, that still feels like online learning, but it's just this elevated experience. And then instructor-led training. I mean, there's no doubt that some of the real aha moments happen when you're learning together, which is why we're implementing a lot of social learning now. So I hope that answers the question. Did I go too far afield on that, Stephanie?
I think that did answer the question. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, great. That is a great question. Again, tier 3 and tier 4 design on stuff like that. So, all right, let's pop back up here. And I do want to show you, we come to this interactivity levels. So let me show you an example of, this is one of our newer videos, so I'm so excited to trot it out. But I'm just going to let this play. It's 2.5 minutes. Maybe I'll share my sound so you can listen to some nice music instead of me talking. Here's an example of a level of interactivity. Which one's this one? Let me double check. This one is level 1. So we've got 5 levels of interactivity at ELB Learning. We used to only have 3. But since we've expanded and we brought in organizations like the Game Agency, they do very high-end, very cool stuff at a level 4, level 3, level 4 interactivity level. That is all the cool stuff you've heard out there. That's what our gaming division is doing. We call it our immersive studio. Our immersive studios are very much on that high end. And then we have some lower end providers or specialists who can do just basic foundational training. So here's an example of what you might see in a level 1. I would expect that any vendor or any potential partner you choose would show you something like this. I'm just going to let this run for 2.5 minutes. awesome. That was hopefully worth 2.5 minutes. We have more of these, by the way. So if you're interested in seeing all of our levels of interactivity, we can show them to you. Although I think we're still finalizing our level 4, but we can show you foundational through level 3. But hopefully that gives you some idea. And I would say any partner you're choosing, they should show you some body of work like that. And be careful for show up and throw up people. I use that word a lot these days, and I've been doing this for a long time. Sometimes you'll have partners who will just show up and throw up. Oh yeah, we can do this, 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 and this. Look at everything we've done. I just call that throwing up. You want a partner or a vendor who's going to understand you and architect the right solution for your needs. And if they don't have it, I mean, if you hear somebody say something, I mean, obviously ELB learning is pretty big. We got 500 employees, 350 in India, by the way, who are amazing. I have said for 10 years, and I went to India back in, when was that? 2015. We were in India just kind of touring and actually meeting some providers. And I've said for years, it's hard to be in our business and not look at India. There's just such talent there. And now, dream come true, the Origin Learning team is part of ELB Learning. And they were an e-learning company growing up in Chennai. And now they've become part of our team. And depending on where your solution is and what the need is, you might be working with 2 guys, 2 ladies, 2 whatever, I don't know, 1 person. But if they will tell you, I don't have a solution like what you're describing, but I got it in my head and I believe I know how I can build it, I would recommend that you say to them, can you give me a mock-up? Can you script something for me before we sign any contracts? And they should be able to do that. Everybody has to write you a proposal. Everybody has to give you a statement of work. And they may not have something. Now, we've got such a body of work now between our Origin team, that's now our we call it our Novus Studio, Latin for new and innovative. So our Novus Studio over in Chennai, and then between our game agency team, which is our immersive studio, and between our, we call it our Inspire Studio, we've got several studios now. So I'm trying to keep it all straight. But between all those different teams, we got lots we can show you. And probably we're going to find you something that's pretty close to what you're looking for. And you can even say to a shop like us, I want my thing to look like that. We can say, okay, well, that costs this much and let's go. But for smaller vendors or providers who may not have what you're looking for, ask them for a mock-up. And if they're like me, with a learning experience designer, instructional designer, they should jump at that chance to show you what my vision is for you. I'm going to architect the right solution for your needs. You could hope they're going to get it, but they should be able to mock something up. The mock-up tools these days are so easy. You can even do it in PowerPoint. Just mock something up. So I've got this idea, and I think we can make it look like this. Make sure it syncs with your vision. Look at me. I'm talking too much, man. It's already 40 minutes in, and I still have 4 more to show you. That's all right. Some of these will move a little more quickly. Choose the right learning tech that will enable your architecture. Hopefully, this particular slide talks about learning hosting. ELB Learning has a couple of hosting options. We didn't ever used to have hosting. 2 years ago, we acquired 2 LMSs, both the Rockstar Learning Platform and CourseMill, which was a Trivantis product back in the day. And so you may have heard of Trivantis over the years. The CourseMill LMS is extremely reliable and used by massive organizations, government and state, federal and otherwise. And then the Rockstar Learning Platform is being used by a lot of private and public companies. But you need to host it correctly. No doubt many of you already have an LMS or a learning management system. I'd like to say this, if I may. These days, you don't have to park everything on an LMS. And that may be a relief to you. Maybe you already know this, but we have a few platforms, even ourselves. We've acquired platform-based businesses that provide stuff that lives in the cloud that can do all your tracking and analytics for you. And so when I say that, I mean, let's just take, for example, Scenario VR. Scenario VR is an authoring tool. That's one of the technologies you could choose that specializes in building virtual reality and 3D imagery that you can just do even on your screen. You don't have to have a headset, although I think that's really cool. And I love that we're moving that direction. If any of you attended Meta's Connect 2 days ago, you saw Zuckerberg talking about their latest and greatest. And Meta is going all in on the office experience, not just for virtual learning, but for engagement. No, if they have their way, Zoom will go the way of the dodo bird. Um, Here's another little insider tip that maybe you already know about. The next launch of Oculus, which will come out in 12 days, it's called the Oculus Pro, price point $1,500 per headset. So it's definitely priced for, corporate spend. The next version will have a plugin right within Teams. So what does that mean? That means you can decide to join your Teams meeting regularly, like you normally would, just like this, or you put on your Oculus and join as your avatar. And your avatar will be sitting right there, on the screen, and you could show stuff in your VR world to the team. Just let me share my screen. That's amazing. So we're all Zoom here at ELB Learning, but I'd love to see that happen. There's so much out there for learning tech right now. It can blow your mind. But I do want to say this as well, let me go back to CVR. Scenario VR. It can build some really cool learning for you that is very easy to use. I've been telling people this for a long time now. Virtual reality is no longer as expensive as you thought it would be. The price point of entry to get into a nice VR course, we have the tool for about $1,500. And then once you have the tool, you just need the imagery. Get yourself a $300 camera, create some cool 360 videos, some 360 images, bring it right in to the tool. And now you're adding hotspots. And now you're adding little arrows to send a learner down a path. And now you're adding a timer so that they have to, that's an escape room puzzle now. They got to look around and find all the right clues. There's hotspots that you have to hover over and find. It's cool, man. And the price point is very cheap. You can now begin to create virtual reality experiences that take the learner beyond just their desktop. Same with games, custom games. Building gamification has never looked cooler and never been more affordable. Again, it gets to the higher end of e-learning, so we can talk about pricing here, maybe toward the end, but choose the right learning tech. If you're using Storyline, Articulate tools, Articulate Rise, they're awesome. We build for a lot of our clients in those tools. Lectora is a tool that we own, and if you haven't seen it lately, you probably should, because it's been very, very much brought into the 21st century, and it does some very cool things. Adobe Captivate has a huge market share. There's lots of cloud-based tools like Elucidate. I mentioned Domino Flow, Adapt. Whatever you're using out there, they're amazing. There's lots of amazing tools out there. You want to really think about what's the right tool. We can help you with that. So if you're thinking about, I really needed to do this, sometimes it may not matter. So okay, I'm moving on to my last three, unless my marketing friends interrupt me.
We do have a couple questions. When it comes to the technology, do we design our courses with accessibility in mind? That's a question from Andrea.
Oh, that's a fine question.
I know, that's like a whole other webinar.
It is, and we have many webinars, and the marketing team's done a great job of leading with that. So you should know that ELB Learning has partnered with Artisan Learning and SweetRush, both providers of custom learning solutions out there in the wild. I think SweetRush is based in California, and then Artisan is back east, I believe. Cool thing, Artisan's a small business, 5 to 10 employees maybe, oh, maybe more than that. But I think they would classify themselves as a woman-owned small business. SweetRush is probably 150, 200 people. They're bigger. Been around a long time. Amazing. If you want some fun, go to SweetRush's website and just have some fun. You could spend all day on there. Anyway, those three companies have come together to create an accessibility consortium. So some of we hope some of the best and brightest minds in the learning tech industry are coming together to suggest to the industry how to best maximize 508 and accessibility. And anytime you're talking about accessibility, Lectora should be in the conversation. We say, without apology, that Lectora is the king of accessibility. You can certainly make the other tools work for accessibility, but with Lectora, it's built right in. So if you need your content to be accessible, and keep in mind, when we talk about accessibility, we're talking about WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, 1.0, 2.0, A, AA, AAA. There's different standards that exist out there based on your requirements. we always ask the question, hey, does what we're building for you need to be accessible? And if it does, then that does limit. And I'm glad you asked the question, because when you talk about the right architecture, that's the right time for that question to come up, because you have to choose the right architecture for that. Is it going to be able to work in such a way that my visually impaired students are going to have a like experience to my able-bodied participants? There's lots of different things to think about there. So yes, we do build for accessibility. I will say, percentage-wise, at any given time, we're working on probably 80 projects. Well, no, I got to make it higher, 150 projects for clients across the globe. And maybe 10% of those are request accessibility. So it's not become ubiquitous yet. And it does take extra time. It takes extra design time, because guess what? You're not going to design a drag and drop activity in an accessible course. Although I'm learning from some of my developer friends out there on the development teams that, yeah, you actually can. You can tab over to it with a screen reader and it'll say, dropper, read something. And over here it says target. And I can see I've got 5 things to drop and 5 targets. Well, accessibility is part of thinking that way. And by the way, Lectora can do that out of the box. So anyway, yes, we do think about accessibility, but not all the time, just kind of based on what the client needs. Typically, if state or federal funds are being spent for a project, universities even, academic, yeah, we definitely know. And sometimes our clients don't know. They say, well, I don't think so. What is that? And we go, well, you might want to double check that, because typically, if you're receiving state or federal funds for X, Y, or Z, you probably are going to get audited at some point, and you're going to need to show that you're accessible. And then you guys have probably all heard, well, I'll just have a PDF of the whole training experience. Well, it's not really accessible. I suppose it is, but you're not giving a like experience to everybody. So in that, we want to be inclusive of all. So again, you're right, Stephanie, we could spend more hours on that entirely. Okay.
Yeah, but I'll let you get back to the real webinar now.
All right, we'll just blast through this in the next few minutes. A learner-centered design. I'm going to show you one example of this. I got it ready. It's teed up right here. So here's a project we built for PayPal. PayPal's a great client. We do a lot with their safety and security teams and their HR teams. For their on-hire their new hire and orientation program, when they're bringing on new leaders, they want their leaders to understand that when you're leading teams at PayPal, we're a highly innovative organization, which they are, by the way. Did you know that Venmo is owned by PayPal? I didn't know that until like a year ago. Probably the rest of you already knew that. But anyway, PayPal is the leader for sure in fintech, financial tech. Well, they want to train their leaders in such a way that the leaders can understand how to manage people, how to manage products, and how to manage priorities. So this learner-centric design for our team, this is a course we're really proud of. We say, okay, let's teach the learners what we need them to know about priorities. And then we come down to, all right, it's time for you to make decisions. How do we spend time on, how do you, what are your, let me zoom this a little bit. What are your business priorities? What are our priorities as a company? What is our culture? How do you as a leader help your employees to make decisions? So this was built in a storyline, quick little video runs. We talk a little bit about how are we going to make the right decisions as a leader. I'll just jump forward on the scrubber line here. Then we're going to introduce you to a few leaders and say, okay, you're now going to run an exercise where these 4 leaders have teams, and their team members are going to bring some thoughts to you. Or these might be the team members, actually. Let me get this wrong. But then we say this, okay, based on what you've learned, we have to balance as leaders risk, time, money, and headcount. For this activity, we're going to assign you random numbers for each. You only have so much time. You only have so much money, so much risk you can take. You only have so many people. So in this exercise, there's your numbers. Don't ask me how we came to those numbers, because there was a detailed process. And we say, all right, let's begin. So we jump in and we say, okay, you're now going to have your team members come to you and ask you questions about priorities. So you can see where I'm going with this. When we think about a learner-centric design, you could design it in such a way as to say, hey, don't forget these things. You need to manage your time, people, money. Okay, next, take a test, you're done. But in this case, we take it a step further and we say, all right, oh yeah, these are your team members. Here comes Michael. And if I was running the audio, you would hear Michael say, hey, I think we should be thinking about our users in Latin America. And there's a real opportunity to expand what we're doing. Let me tell you something, because I was down there recently with my mom and dad, and this is what happened. I realized, wow, somebody should do that. Well, PayPal should do it. He explains it to you, based on what he's telling you, that the risk is about a 2. The time is not that much. Head count's not much. And money's not much. Yeah, I'm going to approve that project. So I click approve. I click submit. And then we get some feedback on there. What's that going to do based on your choice? And then we go to the next situation. But we also, something fun we do as well is at the end, we run a little Rube Goldberg thing. I'm probably going to take me too long to get there, but based on the choices I'm making, let me see if I can get there. Let's see. This one's higher risk. It's higher time, but what's the payoff? Should we do this one? I'm going to deny it. So we'll say this one, I don't think we can make happen. Well, there's a couple of things to think about here. We're not saying you're right or wrong, but you might want to think about a couple of items here that maybe we should have brought into play. Oh, yeah. And then they run based on your choices. International news. PayPal makes this choice. Anyway, you get the point. Does that take a lot of design? Yeah. Is it a learner-centric design? Absolutely. That's what we're shooting for. We're trying to build something that's going to be a learner-centric kind of an experience. By the way, what you just saw was what we call a level 3 course. Level 3 courses typically that's a level 3 interactivity. They have a theme, they have a story, they have deep scenarios. Our immersive studio starts to call those simulations. When you're really thinking about deep sims, now with the immersive studio, you join the simulation from the beginning. You start off holding that sword or dealing with this problem as you begin the scenario, and then you learn and earn as you move along. But that learner-centered design, I hope everybody knows that. Hopefully that's, nothing that is a surprise to anyone. Last 2 points, and then I'll take the last 5 minutes for any questions. Encourage continuous learning. Guys, anymore, learning has to not just be an event. It has to be a process. And I think you all know this too, but the learning can't be, I guess I'll just throw this out there. If your learning is still one and done, take this course, you're done. I'll just say shame on you. Because in this day and age, your learning can be so much more than that. I'm going to take the annual compliance training. Okay, great. Then somebody in your learning team should have a situation within 30 days after taking that training. They should get a text on their phone running through a chatbot system, which is super cheap to do, by the way, that says, hey, based on what you learned about money laundering, answer this question regarding this situation. They respond. It could be an email. Hey, send your response back. It could be a quick little whatever that goes out. Follow up and engagement beyond the learning experience. We've been talking about this forever. I don't have to remind all of us about Kirkpatrick levels of evaluation, right? Level 1, did they love it? Reaction. Level 2, did they learn something? Can they pass a test at the end of the learning? Sure, I'll give them the multiple choice test. Level 3, has their behavior changed? So often, even today in 2022, we're not even checking. We're just hoping they'll get it and send them out into the wild. We're finding more and more as clients come to us that people are doing this better. So continuous learning, think about that and ask your provider, what will you do for me to make sure that beyond this experience, our learners are engaging with the content and behavior is changing? And then it's up to you as the learning leaders internally to determine that results are being impacted, which is that level 4, the holy grail of training and development. Can we get to that level 4? And then finally, number 7, evaluate. So that brings 6 and 7 are together. These dashboards, this one gets into the tools that you need to evaluate. We do have a lot of great tools. I mentioned several of the platforms that live out here. We have the Training Arcade, which is part of our Immersive Studios offering. But the Training Arcade is very affordable. It's available for anyone, and it provides incredible analytics on the back end. The rehearsal video-based practice. Remember when I was just saying send an email out? You can send a rehearsal script out and say, all right, everybody, click this link. Hello, 2 months ago, you learned about unconscious bias. I'd like you to answer this question and watch this quick little scenario. And in your own words, I'd like you to tell me how you'd respond to that. Learners literally respond right from their phones or PCs or tablets. They can practice again and again and say, well, let me try that again. Hold on. And then they finally submit the one they're happy with. And then we socialize that, we share it around. This is continuous learning. This is ongoing evaluation. And all of that's managed right through the platform. Rehearsal, another tool that we acquired a few months back, that is very affordable and very easy to use. So when I say, I know it's harsh, I hate coming to a session and getting people say shame on you and preaching to me. But really, guys, we should be doing this now. We should be providing experiences after the learning. And so many of us are old school. We don't do this very well. And I hope that we're at least thinking about it. Okay, I'm all done now. So I'll stop sharing. And by the way, I think, again, bonus for all of you, if you signed up for this and you're here, and I think there are some who are not here, we got lots of people on today, but I think you're going to get a copy of this. Stephanie may be nice and send it to you.
Yes, I'm always nice. I'm always
nice.
We'll be sending that ebook out with the recording email. We have one last question that I think we have time to squeeze in. Okay. So we have an interesting scenario in the chat. Jennifer is working with a contract writer to write the curriculum for a course, and they have a subject matter expert who's helping the contractor work on this content. Mm-hmm. And she's saying the contractor keeps coming back and saying they need more time. Is there like an industry standard that you should expect? Like if you have an hour seat time for your e-learning course, it'll take X number of hours to write the content. Is there a guideline for that? Or do you have any tips on how to help her kind of prevent, because it kind of sounds like we're getting some scope creep in this project where it just keeps growing and growing. So do you have some tips for Jennifer?
Well, I guess the best tip I could give you is this. For a 30-minute learning experience, and we can all sort of think about it. We kind of know about how big that's going to be. And if I got to train somebody on how to overhaul a whole engine, that's going to be a long course, a lot of learning. There's a lot of parts in there, days and days. But if it's a quick topic, and I know this feels like about a half hour of seat time, for us to design, develop, and deliver a half hour of seat time, it's about 6 weeks. And you got to think, though, we're doing that look and feel graphics team. We are designing it, and we're doing a couple of reviews, alpha, beta. So actually, I could probably track that back. I should bring one of our project managers into this call. But if you track it back, we should be done with the writing and the storyboarding and the scripting and all that within about 3 weeks. So about half that time. So for a 30-minute experience, just speaking off the cuff from my own experience, in about 3 weeks, we're buttoned up and we're building it now. No more changes to content, no more writing going on. We're now building it, and it's about ready to release. So I guess I'll commit to saying about 3 weeks for a 30-minute learning, and you can probably double that going forward. If it's an hour of seat time, an hour of learning, about 6 weeks feels about right. And you do need to do those reviews. You got to build in review cycles. If it's highly complex content, maybe add a few more days to that, but I hope that helps.
All right. Hopefully it does. And I know like in the chat, we have some suggestions about making sure you're building in kind of those weekly periodic reviews so that you can see their progress and know, what they have done so far and kind of understand why they need more time if they do need more time.
Absolutely.
That's great. All right. Well, we are at time. Thank you so much, Rich, for joining us today and sharing all of this knowledge. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We love having you on our webinars. Thank you for the great questions today. And hopefully we will see you all in another one. I'll be sending out the recording along with a link to the ebook and also a link to our custom solutions page where if you want to reach out and ask more questions or talk about a potential project, we would love to talk to you all. And thanks, everyone. Everybody, have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, Stephanie.